What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. The Footballer of the Year nominations have officially been announced. The 3 players nominated for Footballer of the Year have been announced. The All-Stars have been announced as well, the All-Star nominations, and we're going to be here to break down the Footballer of the Year nominations in particular and discuss who we think will win Footballer of the Year. And also as well, do we think some players have maybe been, I suppose, robbed a little bit? You know, there's definitely a few players, in my opinion, that I think should have been in the conversation for Footballer of the Year, should have been nominated, and that hasn't happened. So what we're going to be doing is discussing this in more detail. We're also going to be looking at some reaction over on Twitter as well to see what people have had to say in regards to the Footballer of the Year nomination. So I suppose, first of all, what we'll do is have a look at the players who have been nominated for Footballer of the Year. So it's Brendan Rodgers of Derry, David Clifford of Kerry, and Brian Fenton of Dublin. I don't think anyone can argue with David Clifford getting a nomination for Footballer of the Year. He was absolutely outstanding all year long from a Kerry perspective. Hardly put a foot wrong all season. And looking at those 3 players, I will be honest, I think David Clifford does win that award now, in my opinion, of the 3 players who are in the conversation. Like, I think there was I suppose, an opinion, possibly maybe even at the time from myself after the final, that David Clifford didn't have his best game in the final. But having watched that game back on a couple of occasions, I actually think Clifford did well in that game. You know, like, he set up the goal, he set up a number of scores, he was scoring himself. He missed a couple of chances late on, but I do think overall he still actually had quite a good game from a Kerry perspective. So I don't think there can be any complaints about him being in the conversation. I do think there's a couple of players who are unlucky to miss out. I think in particular James McCarthy, I would have had him over Fenton, in my opinion. Like, if we were to put a Dublin player in there, I think James McCarthy should have been in the conversation. Like, don't get me wrong, I think Fenton had a very good season for Dublin, an absolute colossal, there's no doubt about it. But like, the reason why Fenton had such a good season for Dublin, in my opinion, was because McCarthy had such a good season for Dublin. And, you know, like, Fenton was able to do a lot more of the attacking work, a lot more of the sort of transition play from midfield to attack because of the defensive work that McCarthy done. And like, McCarthy on more than one occasion was an absolute colossal for Dublin. I mean, the breaking up the play, the tackles, at times on opposition kickouts, he was absolutely relentless. And he was doing so many jobs in and around midfield, in my opinion, and he was absolutely outstanding on more than one occasion from a Dublin perspective. Don't get me wrong, I can understand the argument that McCarthy maybe wasn't at his best in the final, and, you know, he maybe had, you know, slightly underwhelming performances in the final at different moments. But I think all in all, McCarthy deserved to be in the conversation. And, you know, like, even if he had a one Footballer of the Year, McCarthy, I would have perfectly understood it, because like, there was so many performances that was absolute top draw from him. The Mayo game, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Monaghan, I thought he was fantastic as well. Like, a lot of the work he was doing, you don't see on the ball as well. And maybe when you're at the game and you're in the ground, you can see how much yards, how much space he covers, and the amount of work that he does. And I thought he was absolutely, absolutely brilliant. And I thought he was very unlucky to not be in the conversation. Another player that I think is very unlucky is Con Basquel, in my opinion. I think I've said it a couple of occasions on this channel already that I feel that Con Basquel should have won Footballer of the Year. He was my pick for Footballer of the Year personally. I know I'm definitely in the minority with that opinion, and I haven't really seen anyone else have that opinion as well. But I think Con Basquel was outstanding for Dublin this year. Top scorer from play in the championship. He was also critical to Dublin winning the All-Ireland in that final. He set up the goal for Paddy Small. He set up, you know, the 2 late scores as well, one for Paul Mannion, one the free for Dean Rock. And he was outstanding all year long. Against Mayo, he scored 2 crucial goals in that game. Against Kildare as well, he was fantastic. Sligo, he was brilliant. And for me, he definitely deserved to be in the conversation for Footballer of the Year, in my opinion. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. And, you know, fair enough, maybe against Monaghan, his performance wasn't as good. But again, I think he was doing a lot of defensive work in that game. He was tracking back. And I think there was a focus on trying to stop Monaghan and stop the influence of Conor McCarthy and Carl O'Connell bursting forward like they normally do. So, Yeah, I think Colin Basquel's quite unlucky to miss out. I think Shane McGuigan could have very well been in the conversation as well. Like, he was the top scorer at inter-county level this year. I went back and looked at some statistics on Shane McGuigan this year. He scored 4 goals and 94 points across 16 matches, the top scorer in the entirety of inter-county football in 2023. And, do you know, like, if Brendan Rodgers is getting in the conversation, I don't understand why McGuigan shouldn't get in. But look, you can only choose 3 players. And I think I'm not disagreeing with Clifford being in the conversation, but I do think James McCarthy and Colin Basquel, who for me would have been 2 and 3, you know, who would have been in that conversation as well, I think have been very unlucky. And for me personally, I would have went with Colin Basquel as Player of the Year, but obviously that is not that's not going to happen. But you know, I don't think anyone is disagreeing with Clifford. In fairness, Tom says here has to be Clifford. Can't understand why Conor McManus can't understand why Conor McManus should have got a mention. Yeah, look, and I mean, it's one of them things. Look, I mean, for Player of the Year, I don't think I would have had McManus in the conversation because he wasn't playing every game. He wasn't always starting. But, you know, I suppose with Player of the Year, like, it is only 3 players that you can pick from. And, you know, nobody's disputing that McManus didn't have a good season. Or, you know, I think sometimes, like on Twitter earlier, I was talking about McCarthy should have got a mention, and I think some people think I'm then disregarding Fenton and saying that he isn't a good player, which is not the case. You know, it's the highest end of the sport when it comes to Footballer of the Year. And like, I think Fenton, don't get me wrong, had an unbelievable season from a Dublin perspective, but I think up until, I would say, the quarterfinal, semi-final, I don't think he was at his brilliant best, like a lot of the Dublin players, to be fair. And I think McCarthy, when he was moved into midfield for the game against Mayo, our season changed, and Dublin went from a side that was, you know, struggling in many ways to break down teams, to break down attacks. And I think putting McCarthy into midfield allowed Fenton to push up further forward, and it made our attack 100 times better. So, but there we go. But yeah, look, McGuigan's a little bit unlucky to miss out. But I think out of the 3 players that are in there, Brendan Rodgers, David Clifford, and Brendan Rodgers, and Brian Fenton, I think David Clifford wins it. Look, a word on Brendan Rodgers, an absolute colossus of a season as well from his perspective. You know, man of the match in a lot of the games that Derry played this year, and even in the semi-final against Kerry, I thought he was absolutely brilliant that day as well. And look, I mean, for everything he's done with Derry football over the last couple of years, it's nice to see him get his mention. And I don't think anybody is disputing, you know, that he shouldn't get an All-Star. But I am a little bit surprised that he's got ahead of, you know, if we're looking at midfielders, you know, Brendan Rodgers and Fenton both ahead of McCarthy, which is a little bit surprising for me. And it kind of makes me wonder, when the All-Star Team of the Year is announced, where does McCarthy fit into it? Are they just going to put him at wing back, which, you know, I think McCarthy was the best midfielder in the country this year, but there we go. I suppose what we'll do is we'll have a little look on Twitter in regards to what people are saying. For anyone who is watching the stream, if you could do me a favor and share this out to your friends and family and leave a like, subscribe. Make sure you lads are smashing that like button. Very much appreciated. So yeah, let's have a look here at what people are saying. So Matthew Hurley, our good friend here, says Basquel, McGuigan and McCarthy can all feel hard done by. McGuigan was top scorer. Basquel was from play and played a huge part in the Paddy Small goal in the final, and McCarthy showed leadership qualities all season. Yeah, I think you know, I think I've already said what Matthew has said there, so we're both on the same page in regards to that. I think Basquel very unlucky to miss out. Look, you can only have 3 players, and I think if it had been Basquel, McGuigan, and McCarthy as the 3 nominees, I think everyone would have went crazy because people would have been like, where is Clifford? So for me, it would have been Clifford, Basquel, and McCarthy. I would have had Basquel as Footballer of the Year personally. Clifford number 2, McCarthy number 3. That in my opinion, that's what I would have went with. But there we go. Kevin Coughlin says Fenton all the way. Correct call to leave James McCarthy out too. Fair enough. Kenny says rename it the Pity Award. Every year, just list Clifford, Andy Moore, and Killian O'Connor, and anyone else. I think that person maybe is a little bit bitter. Conal says Fenton was good for 2 games this year. Do you know what? Like, I wouldn't really agree with that personally, that he was good for just 2 matches. But like, Fenton didn't have a good season, in my opinion, until I would say the quarterfinals. And look, you could probably say that about the majority of Dublin's players, that they really came alive. But like, if we're looking at an overall spectrum of the championship, McCarthy for me, like even in the game versus Roscommon, I thought he was doing a lot of work to stop Roscommon attacks in a game Dublin were really poor on. And Colin Basquel, you think back to the Kildare match, where Dublin, for me, that was the game where Dublin really clicked into gear and started to really dominate matches. Basquel was outstanding in the attack. So there we go. Cahill says has to be Clifford. And I think that might be it. That might be all we have there. Thought there was more quotes, but there we go. There we go. So, yeah, look, I mean, I think overall, for me, I would have gone with Colin Basquel to be in the conversation, but I can understand why a lot of people are going with David Clifford. And look, you know, David Clifford, in fairness, was one of the top scorers in the championship this year. And if we're looking at it in an overall perspective, he was the 5th top scorer in county football this year with 6 goals and 56 points. So, like, he deserves to be in the conversation. There's no question about it. And looking at the 3 players that have been nominated, I would be very surprised if Clifford does not win it. And when was the last time a player won back-to-back Footballer of the Year awards? I can't remember, to be honest with you. I cannot remember the last time that's happened, if ever. And I think it is going to happen now, because I'd just be surprised if they gave it to Fenton, like, or Brendan Rodgers. I would be surprised, to be honest with you, but there we go. Obviously, the people who made these, you know, nominees think that Fenton was Dublin's best player this year, which, you know, I don't think was the case. But there we go. So yeah, let me know your opinions in the comments down below. Who would be your Footballer of the Year? What do you think of these nominations? Obviously, the All-Stars were announced as well. We might discuss that maybe in a future video or future podcast. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Helps the channel grow. If you could share this out to your friends and family, and for anyone who's looking for a bit of GA content in their life, let me know, or share it out, share it to people. You know, get people interested. That would be absolutely brilliant. So, yeah, let me know your thoughts, your opinions on the Footballer of the Year nominations. My name is Aaron. We'll speak to you soon.